Kia ora, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we wrap the week's current affairs with the best political team on television from a very, very Auckland perspective. Warning, we're as fair and balanced as Fox News. Joining me tonight on our evolving panel of bloggers and Auckland opinion shapers. He is a life member of the Devonport Militia, speechwriter, tweeter and militant cyclist David Slack. And he is the Associate Professor at the School of Communication Studies at AUT, Media Oracle, Dr. Wayne Hope. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, Issue 1, Christchurch quake 1 year on. Has the country comprehended how much collateral damage our second largest city has suffered? How does it impact people's lives and the wider economy? Plus, are we seeing a shock doctrine being implemented in the wake of the earthquakes? Issue 2, there seems to be two worlds in New Zealand. The first has massive inequality measured this week in the Lancet report linking poverty to a huge increase of infectious disease amongst children. The other world has Paula Bennett justifying draconian back-to-work measures for lazy beneficiaries while kicking out state tenants deemed too lucky to live in mixed economy neighbourhoods. Issue 3, Bill English gives his best guess on asset sales while acknowledging it will cost us more to sell them than keep them. It took Labour 9 years to reach this level of hubris, as National managed to do it in 4. And we'll end the show on a final word. But let's kick things off with Issue 1. In GDP terms, the earthquakes in Christchurch have been more damaging to us economically than last year's Japanese tsunami was to Japan. Factor in the loss of life and ongoing psychological trauma of aftershock after aftershock, and the enormity of what confronts us as a nation in the Christchurch rebuild doesn't seem matched by government focus. David, are we doing enough?
Short answer, no, doesn't look like it to me. Longer answer, I understand that when you have something as big as this, you're not going to be able to get it all done in a short time. But what I keep hearing and keep reading is that people just can't get the help they're looking for on insurance. They can't get replacement land because the price has gone too high. And you've got to ask yourself, where was the government? Where was the government when it could have been buying land in a large area and maybe rezoning if necessary so that you had a pool of land at an affordable price? That seems to me really obvious, and look, they could still do it if they wanted to. The second thing is, where was the government when everybody was saying these insurance companies are coming at us every which way to weasel out of what they told us all these years they were going to do for us, whereas we happily paid them our premiums? Where the hell are they now? And to that we all say, yeah, where are they? And the other thing I worry about is the sense that, you know, Christchurch has always looked like a place that was quite good at looking after the people on the top of the heap, while everybody else had to kind of look after themselves. And you get an awful sense that that's happening again. James Dan wrote a good opinion piece in the Herald this week that says, look, there's been money straight away for the rugby, and there's been money straight away for a replacement container mall that essentially replicates what the people who go from Fendleton to go and shop at their expensive shops can have resort to. But it didn't have room for, he gave an example of one shop. They said, no, we're not going to have you in here. It's not that kind of place.
Oh, right, okay. So a certain class in container ship.
That's right.
Okay.
And, you know, you'd like to think if something good might come out of something so wretched, the one thing it might do is upend that long entrenched privilege. And it doesn't seem to be.
The magnitude of what's happened seems to require a government almost on a war footing in terms of the economy, in terms of the support going in. But we're not seeing anything like that, are we?
Oh, no, we're not. No. James Dan had a nice line where he said that the emergency powers that Jerry Brownlee had reserved to himself seem to remain largely unexercised.
Exactly. Wayne, business insurance and welfare payments run out this month. How's that going to impact?
Look, I think the biggest impact on Christchurch is all their revenue streams have been cut or severely damaged. Overseas students, business conventions, which used to be a big deal for Christchurch, tourism revenue, the rugby to a certain extent. You add all that up and that's money not coming into the town anymore. That's 5,000 or 6,000 people leaving per year. And on top of that, through the late 70s, 80s and early 90s, the manufacturing base of Christchurch was decimated anyway.
That's right.
Right?
Dead right.
And some of us might remember the early 90s, the Richardson Shipley benefit cuts.
Yes.
That really hit working class Christchurch in the east. And then we had an earthquake. So it's a big deal. The government has to come in as lender as last resort. They have shown some urgency, to be fair, but probably not the macroeconomic urgency that's really, really required. I mean, everybody knows that Christchurch is going to have to be rebuilt a little bit more to the west.
Yep.
Everybody knows that we're not going to rebuild on Bexley anymore.
Yep. Yep.
But what we need is solutions in the short to medium term.
Right.
Pragmatic stuff.
Right.
If your house is not munted, but it's reasonably safe to live in, you should be able to live in it.
Right.
If you run a business and it's the premises are empty, no one's going to die if they go in and shop there, you should be allowed to open it.
Right.
But sometimes the strict letter of the law and sort of bureaucratic logjams
Yep.
is actually stopping Christchurch getting started again.
Right.
And that's what underpinned those huge demonstrations on February the 2nd by Christchurch standards.
David, the Treasury keeps getting growth forecasts wrong because the Christchurch rebuild just isn't occurring. How can Auckland pick up the economic slack if central government keeps blocking Len Brown?
That'd be a rhetorical question.
I mean, look, get out there.
Look, I keep saying that this government in the end is going to be remembered more for what they didn't, what they failed to do than for what they did. You know, they are actually a very cautious, inactive government in any area where it matters, and so you're not seeing impetus, and the fact that God Almighty that they're hanging their hat on hope of recovery on something wretched that happened to the country is a pretty bloody sorry indictment. You know, I think the growth that we're looking for is going to come from a decent kind of an economic strategy that ensures that we're getting more engaged with the world in many more ways, in many more high-value businesses, and that doesn't happen overnight. But I don't see them doing nearly enough on that front as well.
I think the government needs a strategy for job creation across the economy as a whole.
Yeah.
I think it's a mistake to rely on some kind of construction boom in Christchurch, because if you go down there, there's still lots of rubble, there's still buildings that are standing, so the rubble has to still be cleared, buildings have to be dismantled, so the construction boom, such as it might be, is going to be very uneven anyway, so we don't want to clutch at straws.
Naomi Klein in The Shock Doctrine makes the case that free market adventures tend to get launched on a stunned population in the wake of natural disasters. She notes charter schools were implemented en masse in New Orleans in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. Charter schools are being trialled in Christchurch. With a council minder being appointed, are local democracy and local voices being eroded here?
Well, I'll tell you what I've noticed over the last few days. On the one hand, we've had this one anniversary of the pain and suffering, and it's all everybody in this together and holding hands and listening to the Governor General. But hey, when it comes to rebuild and all the rest of it, it's quite selective, isn't it? Because democracy is contracting. And there's a disconnect between the Christchurch City Council and most of the population. It was extraordinary at that demonstration on February the 2nd to see a professional firefighter stand up. He'd clearly been working as many long weekends as Mr. Marriott, saying that his increase in salary is less than what I get each year. And that's what the disconnect is.
Wow.
Yeah, that's true.
A question to both of you. The détente between Bob Parker and Jerry Brownlee seemed to have been broken recently when Bob claimed rates could be set by the powers Jerry has been given, prompting Jerry to describe Bob publicly as a clown. With anger at local council bureaucrats bubbling up in the vacancy of any relief, how far will we allow central government to take over?
I think this raises an issue for the entire country. What is the dividing line or the boundary line between the ability of local bodies to raise revenue and the ability of the central state? We have the same problem here in Auckland. Anytime that Mr. Brown or his colleagues look at creative revenue raising activities, then Mr. Joyce and others don't really like it, do they? So this issue is being played out in a really big way, of course, down in Christchurch, and it's far from resolved.
You did right. I mean, we actually had one. There was a regional petrol tax was going to happen, and they reversed it.
That's right.
And it's dopey. You know, if you're looking to find a way to deal with your transport problems, a smart place to look for that money might be out of the pockets of people who use transport.
It's worth noting that the balance between central government and urban government in terms of ability to raise revenue is really biased towards central government in New Zealand by world standards.
Thank you, panel. Moving on to issue 2, the Lancet report published a report this week showing the enormous jump in poverty and infectious diseases amongst New Zealand children, linking poverty and ill health firmly together, while Paula Bennett toured the country selling her hi-ho, it's off to work we go travelling welfare game show that passes for government consultation these days. David, is Paula Bennett in denial over child poverty and its increase under her policies?
I don't know. Has she read the briefing note? Look, I've got, as that might imply, I've got little regard for what imaginative powers and analytical powers she's bringing to that role. I think she's the water carrier for other people.
Yes.
And so the question is, who's formulating these ideas and what have they got in mind? And I think the answer is the same thing that has so long bedeviled this national party, and I think it was who wrote about it? Someone wrote some years ago that the your typical National Party cabinet minister was somebody who'd grown up in a relatively small rural town who used to come in on Friday and he'd see all these louts at the burger bar and he said didn't seem to be doing anything and thought that you ought to sort them out.
Right.
And there's that kind of spiritual emptiness that besets the National Party that just thinks there are people that need to be tidied up and everything will be okay.
Yes.
Look, I think what became abundantly clear during the last Labor administration was that to the extent that they did address difficulties for people at the bottom of the heap, they were doing it with case management and recognising that one by one you sit down with people and say what's going on in your life, what can we do to make it right. Now at a certain point you've also got to come up with dough. And you can't be niggardly about that, but you can't. The National Party seems to have this idea that there's a magic shortcut to so many things. Then if you just let the market signal tell people that they should run a bit harder, the old hamster will just make the wheel do whatever you want it to do.
Because of course welfare payments are set 20% below what the weekly kilojoule need for an adult is. The idea being if they're hungry enough, we can poke them into work, right?
That's right.
Wayne, it turns out social development accidentally handed out $200 million in last year alone to beneficiaries. Isn't it the system within the department that needs fixing rather than punitive solo mother back to work dog whistles?
The punitive solo mother stuff's been around for a long time. Reached its high water mark in the early 90s under Shipley and Richardson. But really you've got to look at the history of Rogernomics to get a handle on this. There's a whole range of researchers, Brian Easton, Susan St John, Paul Dalziel, Des O'Day. They all show there's been a gap between rich and poor getting wider between 1984 and 1996. And part of that is evidenced in unemployment and the lowering of the minimum wage in terms of what it can buy. And what you're doing there is you're throwing more and more people onto benefits because the macroeconomy is contracting, right? And so what do? Then you blame those people for being on benefits, for not being able to budget properly. And the other thing that you do is you stop anybody who wants to raise the minimum wage because large employers want downward pressure on the minimum wage, right? So that's the situation we're in at the moment. New Zealand is a socially polarised place. In fact, if you compare social democracy in New Zealand, which is of a Scandinavian type, up to about the mid-80s, and then you fast forward to the late 90s, the growth in social inequality in New Zealand has been faster than any other country in the world.
That's right. Question to both of you. Talkback Radio tells me that this is only first world poverty and that solo mums get paid to breed and they have their Sky bills paid for and beachfront state mansions given to them in their pit bull dog breeding pens. Why should we care about growing inequality if it's first world poverty? They don't know how lucky they are, do they?
Well, if you're well off, you should be worried. The crime rate goes up. If the crime rate goes up, the burglary rate goes up. Do you know what happens when the burglary rate goes up? Your insurance premiums go up.
So there is actually a long-term economic hit in the pocket for the gated communities of New Zealand.
Well, if you're well off, you have an increase in feelings of insecurity is basically what happens.
Why should we care?
Well, I think there's isolation going on here where people are just out of touch with how their community works anymore, and so they're happy to believe these kind of myths that you've just quoted from the Talkback Radio.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah. anywhere you go, you'll find somebody who's a backslider, but that doesn't mean that everybody who draws a benefit is one. Just as not every person who wears a business suit is a corporate fraudster who's in before the dock.
Right. Although there's certainly a lot
There are some.
There's some before the dock right now, I think.
right, exactly.
Oh, I was thinking of that.
The point
Bruce
is that-
Jessen, by the way. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'd forgotten his name, and that's who said that about Holly.
Right.
and all
The
those
point
people.
is here is that there's been a breakdown in social ethics at every level of society. Okay, so that means the people running the finance houses, as well as those people that might be corralling different people's benefit checks. So the important thing to note is not that bad things aren't happening among beneficiaries, but that this is actually symptomatic of society as a whole.
If we throw these beneficiaries back into the workforce and we take off the benefits if they don't find work or don't agree to work, where are they going to find the jobs? I mean, aren't we just creating a level of unpeople? Because once you're no longer considered unemployed, they don't register you any longer. So we have a growing crowd of New Zealanders who aren't being officially registered as unemployed, which keeps the actual numbers a little bit lower. Where do they actually find the jobs? Where are they going to find the jobs?
Why would you take up a job on a low hourly rate when you have to pay high transport costs to get there, perhaps? It's just not worth your while. And
Right.
if you're a single parent, your energy's better spent looking after your children. What's happening a lot in low-income communities, apart from the underground economy, of course, and it's all of its manifestations, is barter arrangements.
Right.
You know, I mow my lawns, you do this. People being paid under the table, because if you play the game, you get penalised.
Right. Why do you think we're going to have this problem?
Well, you've described the vicious cycle, and that's what we've kind of put ourselves into by not making our economy as strong as it could be and exposing ourselves to a level of indebtedness that's really bloody hard to pull back out of now. And it's hard to actually unscramble this egg.
Yeah.
But it can be done.
Yeah.
You know, but you've got to have those case managers who are working with people saying, well, if the only thing we can find you is this crap job, let's have a look at what training we might be able to do that might get you a job. It might have to be in Australia, because I think that's going to be the answer, the short term
Is
for a lot of
David
people.
Shearer, as leader of the Labour Party, missing in this debate? Missing in action in this debate?
Oh, I sort of regard him as the Chauncey Gardner of New Zealand politics, really. You remember Chauncey didn't have a great sense of Labour Party history or economic history.
Yep.
And if you look at his statement so far, especially his interview with Bryce Edwards on YouTube, doesn't see any knowledge of economic history, understanding at all, really.
Where is he? Is he surfing still?
Listening.
Listen, he's listening, is he?
I think he's
very good at listening.
No,
Chauncey did a lot of listening, if you remember.
I say that mockingly, but actually I think if he does listen properly and if he does absorb what people have to say and he can, and I think that's a strength he has, that he is actually a perceptive person and he's good at. Most people who meet him say they get the sense at the end of the meeting that he gets it,
Yes.
whatever it is they're talking
Yep.
about. Well, if he can,
He gets what exactly, Dave?
their beef, whatever their problem is. Now, if he can,
Well, that's Chauncey, that's what he was like.
But the problem is, if you can't synthesise all that and then come up with a solution, then you are Chauncey. But
Right.
let's see. I think he could do it.
How long are we waiting? 9, 7, 6 months before the Cunliffe barbecue starts firing up?
No. How long did Goddo take?
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 3 tonight. Bill English shocked the country late last week when he said his $800 million overinflated asset valuation was his best guess. It's not a game of Monopoly, Bill. You're running the country, not building a hotel on Park Lane while trying to avoid landing on utilities. David, does best guess go and collect $200? Pass go and collect $200 as an answer.
Well, Treasury are the enablers here. You know, they're really giving him whatever he wants to say. This might be a goer. Look, the real answer, answer I come up with again and again when we talk about asset sales is it's got to be the ticket clippers. That nobody else actually benefits from this to any great extent.
The lawyers and the consultants.
Yeah, that's right. Everybody, the brokers, everybody who gets in it, because they make out like bandits on this thing.
Right.
There are hundreds of millions of dollars to be made out of the flotation and everything that goes with it. Now, you've got a whole industry of people in there who are happily lobbing day in, day out, saying, oh, you want to sell that one, you've got to sell that, it's good for the economy.
That's right.
But demonstrably it's not. These things get a better return than you're likely to get on a depressed market where you're going to go up and say, oh, I've got a power station and another one and another one and another one. Yeah, well, so I'm a fourth one, and good luck, to all of
Buy
that.
3, get 1 free.
Well,
Yeah.
But the I think the answer is self-interest, and ideology's got bugger all to do with it actually, because Key's not a great ideologue.
Wayne, selling the assets will cost us in lost dividends more than it will now gain us if we keep them. I put it to you that it is actually pure ideology that's driving this now. It can't be economic factors. The economic factors don't stack up.
Yeah, I think you're right. At the same time, though, I've got a bit of sympathy for Bill English.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the world economy, the Greek economy defaults, they go out of the Eurozone, what happens then? Sovereign bond holders are in trouble, and then the banks are in trouble. Then you get a liquidity crunch.
Yep.
And then that means there's not many people left in the market to buy partially sold state assets. So the government is guessing, but what else can you do in such a volatile, uncertain economic environment? And that's precisely the reason we shouldn't even go near this policy.
Right. So when the odds are so great and not quite certain, when the return isn't so certain, we shouldn't be gambling with our future, should we?
No, and certainly not guessing with it either.
Question to both of you. Seeing as any new owner of shares can redistribute them in any way they like, the government in the future will need to buy shares to maintain its 51% ownership. How much of a rort will it be for taxpayers to shell out taxpayer money to buy shares to the benefit of New Zealand's richest investors? That would be a terribly large rort.
Yes, I have to cast my mind all the way back to, I don't know, Air New Zealand.
Right.
Where the same damn thing happened.
Right.
It got floated, it got merged with Ansett, the Briley people flew it into the ground, it got resuscitated by government money.
That's
because it was strategically important for that to happen. By good fortune, they found that they were now in the hands of a good chief executive, and it's kind of came right. But it tells you that this nostrum that the market knows best and the corporate buccaneers are superior managers is just so much tosh.
Is it going to be a rort if the taxpayer ends up having to buy more shares to keep the 51%?
Yes. And the big problem here too, though, is that some of the likely buyers are like to be private equity funds, perhaps, and they're all they're interested in is short-term profit.
Yeah.
So they'll break things up. They'll, they might advocate more and more redundancies. All sorts of stuff could happen. Look at the private equity firms that are into MediaWorks at the moment, and what's going to happen to media in New Zealand because of that.
That's right.
I mean, there's the template for what's likely to happen if you get a private equity fund involved with Meridian or Mighty River.
Yeah.
Quick thought.
And let's bear in mind, peak oil means that electricity is going to become increasingly more important to our economy because of the energy, and we're giving away this enormously important strategic asset.
And I should point out that private equity funds aren't run by mum and dad investors.
Oh no, certainly not. Quick thoughts on what's happening with the Labour Party leadership struggle between Gillard and Rudd. Thoughts?
I thought every time he dropped the F-bomb, he raised another point of popularity in the western suburbs of Sydney.
Absolutely. Quick thought?
Oh, I just think Kevin Rudd is blessed with more self-regard than any other politician I've ever come across.
Yeah.
Maybe just me, but I find the guy insufferable, to be honest. I mean, it's not very objective.
That is the Labour Party. That's right. Let's wrap the show with last word. David, your last word this week is?
Well, my wife and I have been married for 20 years, but we've had a subscription to the Herald for even longer than that, but we divorced them this week. And the final story I have to tell you was that in the same week we got both that toxics outpouring from Paul Holmes.
Oh, terrible column.
And then Rachel Glucino reappears on the back page of the paper, and we'd already been bemoaning its tabloid direction. We said, that's enough. So,
brave decision.
sorry, but
brave decision.
Daddy, don't you walk so fast.
Wayne, your final word this week?
Well, great little article in the business section today. Dominus Strauss-Kahn?
Yes.
Remember him? The former chief of the IMF? It seems as though he's been spending a lot of money on prostitution rings, and it seems to me that could be a way to kickstart the Greece economy, the Spanish economy. I mean, they got a lot of spending power that's not there anymore. They need demand aggregation, don't they? So, I mean, Dominic seems loaded with the cash. So he could perhaps start the underground economy, and the official economy will start after that.
What a
Bunga
beautiful
bunga parties with drachmas.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Wayne. Ladies and gentlemen, to my final word. I don't know about the rest of you, but this story that supposed Russian thieves have hacked into Murray McCully's emails smells so bad that it bends the realms of credibility. Why the bloody hell would Russian hackers hack Murray's emails and release emails that don't embarrass Murray? Why wouldn't it be something about the Russian-New Zealand free trade deal? Why were they so keen to point out that they weren't anonymous? Was it because the computer skills and imagination of whomever stole them wasn't good enough to pretend to be anonymous, and they feared Anonymous might come looking for someone who was pretending to be them? Why the hell would they call themselves the Comrades? Isn't that like a New Zealand hacker group calling themselves the Mates? Isn't the Comrades something someone wanting to identify as Russian would call themselves? Why bring attention to your group geographically? Doesn't that make it easier to track them down? And don't the authoritarian mafia state of Russia deal very harshly to all types of crime? Wouldn't pretending to be somewhere far away from Russia be a much better idea? The Tasman Sea Militia would have been a smarter name if they are actually Russian. How come they are that thick, yet have enough local media knowledge to know contacting Patrick Gower would be just enough media smokescreen to cover up the gutting of MFAT? So many questions and so few answers. This must be an inside job, because only MFAT staff could be this incompetent. Doesn't the fact that all the emails released paint Murray in such a good light suggest it's Murray who's actually releasing them? Kevin Rudd released that footage of himself swearing so that he had an excuse to challenge Julia Gillard for the top job by blaming her for its release. Isn't it amazing? Instead of asking questions about these savage staff cuts and why Murray is trying to get a profit return on our aid money, all the attention is suddenly on the supposed Russian cyber crime syndicate releasing positive spin for Murray. This whole thing is very smelly. If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded news citizens, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook page. Thanks for watching, whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.